This is Corolla DeVille, and you're watching Inkwife TV. I have a client who wanted a Lord of the Rings themed tattoo, and she was very fond of the character Treebeard. And so she came to me with a project idea, and that made me very happy because I am a big Lord of the Rings fan. I grew up watching the 1977 Rankin and Bass production, and if you have not seen it, I suggest you watch it once. It's very charming and classic, and it's a piece of animation that I've never seen anything else quite like it. Anyway, that started my love affair with all things J.R. Tolkien. So when the first Lord of the Rings movie came out in the early 2000s, I watched it, and it just rekindled my love of it, and I dove into reading every Tolkien book that I could get my hands on. And anyway, I just spent some time really diving into that fantasy world. So this is a tattoo that hits very close to home, and I had a wonderful time designing and tattooing it as well. For the art style, I went back to the classic Tolkien art that was put out around the times when the original books were published. I had a book of classic Tolkien art, of artwork and drawings and paintings that were designed for the characters in the book. And I think they were done back in the 40s and such. But I wanted to stick with that storybook type of feel with this tattoo. So I designed Treebeard and the little hobbit sitting up on his shoulder. We're going to call him Meri. We're just going to assume that it's Meri. I wanted them to look like sketchy, pencil drawn, or an ink drawing, but then the flowers, I wanted to be more watercolor. And so the combination of both of those two have a good classic storybook feel, and it gave a different sense to this tattoo, I thought. I looked online for other Treebeard and Lord of the Ring pieces, and nothing just felt satisfactory, but remembering those images in my mind that I had seen, in the books and in the classic artwork, that really hit home to me. So I wanted to make something original and different that hadn't been, really done before. Or at least not in a very, very long time. So now I'll talk about the tattoo a little bit. So the flowers are going to be, for the most part, light. I did not want them to have black outlines around them. That would make them too heavy. There's so much darkness in the Treebeard portion. I wanted the flowers to be very contrasting with the rest of the tattoo. So I lightly sketched in all of the details on Treebeard and Meri using 5-round liner. And I wasn't, what's wonderful about a tattoo like this is when you're doing, natural textures, it's okay for your lines to be a little lighter or a little darker, because that adds to the texture. And like if you're doing a traditional tattoo, you want those lines to be solid and even. But if you're doing something that you are seeing out in nature, there's a lot of variables in nature. So it's okay for those lines to be a little light or a little dark. I'm not saying you want to be careless. You need to be very particular with your darkness and lightness. But be deliberate with it. Anyway, so we're going to now talk about what I'm doing in super fast. My hands were in the way, so I'm not showing it. So for outlining all of the flowers, I took the colors that I was going to be using on those flowers in those areas. So I had them pre-planned, their colors, and I just ran outlines of those different colors that I would be using. I ran the outline in that, so when I come back for the second session, I know what colors already are going in those flowers. There's no obnoxious black or gray outline on the outside. It will look very soft and natural. So here we're getting to the part of the tattoo that I thought was the most fun, and it worried me just a little bit because I knew I was branching out into something that I've never done anything quite like this, and I saw it in my head. I knew how I wanted it to turn out, but I was torn between, shading it in a traditional manner with like a 23 curved mag and going in with my 5-round liner and just doing little scratchy zigzags, little etches in the skin lightly to create the texture. And at the end of the day, I was like, you know what? I'm going to go with what I feel is right, even though I have never done a piece this large with, with this style of shading. But it felt right in my gut, and so I just went for it. And, sometimes you have to do that, and I was so pleased with the results. You can see close up, the needle is just zigzagging back and forth. Sometimes I'm moving forwards, sometimes I'm zigzagging backwards. When you're zigzagging your needle forward, it's going to lay into the skin differently than when you're zigzagging it backwards. So I go both ways depending on how dark I want it or how I want it shaded. But the difference in those textures, in how fast I'm moving my needle, also changes how dark and how saturated it is. So I'm making slight changes to the depth and the speed and the direction I'm putting this in, so that I have those contrasting darks and lights all over the tattoo, which gives a very, very good tree bark effect in my opinion anyway. So all this zigzagging just kind of goes on endlessly, and it's the same thing, and there's nothing else I can describe about it. So I'll talk about something different. I've never talked about the machine I used before, the tattoo machine. My preference is a Cheyenne Hawk pen. That is what I am currently using. Cheyenne Tattoo Equipment does not sponsor me, but I think it is a great piece of equipment, and I have nothing else to talk about while I finish scribbling all over Treebeard's face. So I will tell you why I like this machine. To me, it feels like a big magic marker, and it's very lightweight and very, very consistent. It's a well-made machine. The only complaint that I have about it is if you drop it, it's probably done. Like, I owned one when I first started tattooing. It was the first really good machine that I bought, and I dropped it probably about 3 or 4 months in after having it, and then how well it worked was questionable from then on out. It was just a little off. And then I dropped it a second time when it was about 9 months old, and that killed it. It was gone, so I brought it home. My husband tried to take it apart, and he's like, I can't even get this thing open. So that's the only drawback to it, that we could not figure out how to fix it if it falls, and it's got the gyroscope inside of it. So it is a fragile machine, and you can't just go get replaceable parts. You have to buy a new one. So anyway, after I broke the first one, I purchased a Spectra Direct, which has all replaceable parts, and I used that machine for a while, replaced several of the parts. The motor went out once, and I just bought a new motor, and I was very happy with it. But it never felt quite as good as the Cheyenne Hawk pen. So after about a year or two of working with the Spectra Direct, I thought, you know what, I really miss that pen, and I spent the money, bought a second one, and stuck the Spectra into the drawer as my backup. Anyway, I have not dropped this one yet, and I've had it for over a year, so that is good. We're going to knock on wood and assume that I'm going to continue to be a good, slow-moving, careful artist and not throw my equipment around the room. You know, I've dropped many things and knocked many things over and made lots of messes in the process of tattooing. And usually I have problems when I'm going too fast, when I'm in a hurry, I'm in a rush, I'm not thinking about how fast my arms are moving as I'm, you know, going from dipping my needle to back to the client. I'll get to moving too fast, and then I'll bump something with my elbow, or anyway, that's not good. So when I feel that, oh, I've got a little anxiety, I'm starting to move too fast, I just deliberately slow down. I recognize that I've got some tension and some anxiety going on, maybe a little manic behavior because I'm bipolar, and sometimes that happens. You know, I have my manic days, and when I recognize that, I just tell myself, slow down, breathe a little bit more easy, you know, just deliberately put myself at about 50% pace and do not let myself run full throttle because I'll end up making messes that way. So with that attitude in mind, I have not dropped my new Cheyenne Hawk pen. It has been running so well, and as long as I don't drop it, we should have a very good relationship in store. Here is the end of session 1 with Treebeard and Meri finished and all the flowers outlined. So 3 weeks passed, Treebeard healed, and you can see that he is practically as dark as I left him at the end of session 1. Everything healed. My client said that he hardly peeled or flaked at all. So this wonderful little light sketching tattoo style tends to heal very, very well because it just does not do much damage to the skin at all. And it's not such a solid damage. So, you know, when there's more skin exposed in between the tattoos, it's easier for the body to heal. So for coloring the flowers, we're not going to take near as much time on this second half of the tattoo as we did on the first, just because you can see me coloring flowers on most of the other videos. I do a lot of flowers, but for these guys, I think those were peonies. Yeah, peonies that I'm working on right now. I began with purple concentrate to put some dark shadows into those flowers. I'm now using my 23 curved mag, running it around 5.2 volts, and just softly, gently fading it into the flowers. After all the purple concentrate was put in, I went in with some light purple and then topped it all off with a little fuchsia. So it fades from a very dark purple to a pink tone, but it's a purplish pink tone. It looks more pink next to the purple, but if you saw it beside other pinks, you'd say, yeah, that definitely has a purple hue. Anyhow, I've used this color combination many times, and it's always satisfactory to me. After the fuchsia was finished, we put in our light greens to soften up the leaves. And you see what I mean by it feels like a classic Little Golden Book art style, the way the flowers are painted in there, you know, with no hard outlines. I think this is a very unique style that feels, you know, old and classic. I love how this red fade works too on these flowers, where it's super dark and then goes to light on the inside. I wanted to put a few white highlights into Treebeard. He was, you know, there's a lot of texture in him, but he was still just a little bit flat. and I wanted certain parts to stand out. I'm not working off a picture for these highlights. I'm just putting it where I feel like it is going to look good. Just kind of following my gut at this point. Meri needed some highlights too. So he got a few. Because of the angle of her shoulder, you really can't see, but I put a few highlights up in his face and in his hair as well. And then I felt that the purple peony needed a little bit more detail too, so I added those highlights. And here they are, all finished. I love this piece. I hope you like it too. My client loved it, so that's truly what matters. But thank you guys for watching, and we will have more videos for you soon. Have a great day.